This week we're looking at filming all kinds of live music, whether it's a massive concert or just a few people getting together for a small acoustic session in someone's house. Hello, my name is Simon Cade and this is DSLRguide. So over the last few weeks I've been working on a documentary with a band called Glue, and so I've been filming a whole bunch of live music, so I thought I would take you guys behind the scenes. Now the first thing we did is film some live sessions. Now we decided to film in one of the band members' bedroom, firstly just because it's a really accessible, easy place to film, but also because I think it fits quite nicely with the kind of persona of the band, in that they are just a kind of small unsigned band who actually are really down to earth and are definitely the opposite of pretentious. So from a filming perspective, the space was really small, so I had to back up the camera right against the wall, and then we positioned them with the lead singer front and centre, and then the other members kind of just behind, and in a way that we could just about see everyone. So filming live music is one of the few parts of filmmaking that actually does require a fair amount of equipment. If you want to have more than one camera angle, then the reality is that you're going to need more than one camera. So you could kind of cheat it and get them to play the same song twice, and on the second go you move the camera to a different angle. So for this to work, they need to be really well practiced, but they'd also need some sort of metronome in their ears so that they don't go out of time. Now of course this isn't nearly as authentic as a real live performance, and it also doesn't really work on a live gig or some sort of event because they can't just play the same song over and over. So it really does make sense to use more than one camera, even if this means just kind of renting a really cheap one just for that shoot. So the setup I used was a master wide shot, which was just a very wide lens on a tripod, and then I had a second camera with a second tripod, which I was operating and just kind of picking off close-ups at all times in the video. So the idea was that I could show the wide shot in the edit, and then when I wanted to use a close-up, I could cut to the second camera and then cut back to the wide shot as the second camera was repositioning for the next one. So in one take of each song we had enough coverage for all of the videos, and if you want to see how these videos turned out, then there's a link in the description. Now at the concert I used a similar setup, although I decided to use a medium shot of the lead singer rather than doing a kind of master wide, and now looking back on it I kind of wish I had went for a wider shot, and I'm also kicking myself for not bringing any of the really cheap cameras that I have lying around and kind of placing them with the drummer or maybe just at kind of random places in the stage. So maybe you can learn from some of my mistakes. So lighting is really important for live music sessions. I think it's really worth listening to the song and thinking about the persona of the band and what kind of lighting would fit that nicely. So to me there are kind of two main routes that you could take. The first one would be to say, well, let's have really hard lighting and let's flag it off the background so that we've got a really dark background and it kind of looks a bit like a stage. Or you could go for really soft lighting, which has a more natural, organic feel to it and tends to work really well with acoustic music. So on the blog post I'll link to two examples of these kind of different ways that you can light things. So lighting at gigs is completely different. When I was filming their gig, what we found is that they've got loads of lights and a really good setup, but I wish I'd talked to the person who was in charge of the lights a bit more, because while I was really happy with the lighting when they were doing a sound check, then the second the music actually started, they brought in this really powerful blue light which I really didn't like, and it also was interfering with my camera's shutter, and to do with the hertz of the electronics and stuff, it was basically making this flicker that is commonly associated with fluorescent lights. So even changing the shutter speed of my camera didn't fix it, so next time I'll definitely know to talk to the person in charge of the lights more and kind of test out different ones to see what works and what doesn't work. But we still haven't talked about the main focus of live music, which is of course the audio. So the first thing is to make sure that the musicians are really well practiced, and also that they've got their instruments tuned very regularly before and during the shoot. And if you're considering renting or buying any lights or cameras, then I definitely recommend thinking about your audio, because it's just really hard to avoid the fact that for live music you need a lot of microphones and you need some sort of mixer or multi-track recorder which can handle all of those microphones. So we only had access to 3 microphones, so we used a condenser microphone for the vocals, and then we had another condenser microphone, so we put that pointing at both the guitar and the bass amps, which isn't ideal, but it's kind of all we had. And then we used a Rode video mic, which is also a condenser microphone, and again, not ideal for recording music, but we pointed it at the lead guitar amp, and then these were all going into my Zoom H5, which was recording them in a multi-track file, so that I could then manipulate each track individually. Now of course we couldn't mic up the drums because we didn't have enough mics, and you can really hear that it's not a kind of clean recording. It's very roomy with lots of kind of echo sound and definitely not any of that kind of low-end proper drum sound. So really we should have just kind of stuck to a much simpler setup since we didn't have enough microphones, because just the reality is if you want to mic up a 5-piece band, it's going to take at least 7 microphones. You know, people use tons of microphones just on the drums, so it really is quite hard to do live music without lots of equipment. So recording music isn't quite as simple as just pointing one Rode video mic at the band and seeing how that sounds. But luckily there is a whole bunch of videos on YouTube about where to put your mics and what kind of mics to use, so I'll put a whole bunch of those in the blog post. Highly recommend you check that out if you're interested. Now of course filming the gig was great because they already had everything mic'd up, including the drums, so all I had to do was plug in my audio recorder to the stereo output of the mixer, and then I would just listen to the music during the sound check and set my levels so that I had plenty of headroom. I was kind of peaking at -12 dB, which meant that if they got a bit louder then it wouldn't peak. So have a listen to the difference between a fully mic'd up drum kit and then kind of our really cheap recording method and see just how different it sounds. Now of course the only problem with this was that we couldn't manipulate the tracks individually because it had already been through the mixer and was just giving 2 channels rather than the kind of separate tracks of our live session recording. Now I'm not going to go into the post-production side too much, but the kind of general idea is that you want all of the level of each individual track to be kind of somewhat balanced, and then also you're going to use your standard panning, EQ, compression and reverb to get the kind of sound that you want. And again, I'll put a whole bunch of videos on the blog post which relate to those topics if you want to learn more. So in terms of visuals, the post-production is very similar. You're just going to do your standard color grading and editing like you would any other project. So I'd recommend that you sync up the audio from your mixer or audio recorder with the visuals, and then just kind of set about editing it. And if you want some inspiration for that kind of thing, then I highly recommend you check out Serial Box on Vimeo, which is a great series of live music recordings, and notice the pace of the editing and the kind of shots they're using, but also look out for their really nice kind of rustic locations and obviously just really high quality overall. So that's pretty much it for this week. If you check out the blog post, then there's, as I said, loads of videos, including some inspiration from Serial Box, but also the final videos that we did from Glue's live recordings. And that's it for this week. I'll see you next time.